Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sean Tiernison. I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar at Entrepreneurship to the Point. We want to welcome all our participants that's dialed in. We've got over 300 participants registered for the call. So welcome. I see that we've got people from all over the country, as far afield as Limpopo, Durban, Cape Town, and even Smondio, Midrand. So welcome to everybody. We'll be kicking off the session where we are unpacking the SMME Relief Fund from the Department of Small Business Development. When the lockdown was announced, the Department of Small Business Development was one of the first ministries that came to the fore in terms of providing some sort of relief for small and growing businesses in South Africa. And today our guest is Tumi Sefolo from SEFA. She will be unpacking some of the mechanisms of the fund and then also give us an update in terms of where things are at and just a perspective from government around what's happening. So once again, welcome to Entrepreneurship to the Point. We are here to provide entrepreneurs with information and inform, equip, inspire. Entrepreneurship to the Point has been around for 7 years. Our aim has been to be able to engage small businesses, develop, equip, and inspire them through masterclasses, through events, and through engagements. With the COVID-19 crisis, we moved all our operations online, and we're able to bring you these webinars to be able to provide the necessary support and information to your business. You can follow us on all the social media channels as Entrepreneurship to the Point, E to the Point at Twitter. We've got a YouTube channel with all our webinars and previous videos loaded. So you can also go and search for us on YouTube at Entrepreneurship to the Point. And today's recording will also be available on our YouTube channel. So please do link in with us. On that note, I'd like to just welcome Tumi and ask her to please provide a bit of an introduction to herself. Tumi is the executive for direct lending at SEFA. So Tumi, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone. As Sean has introduced, I am Tumi Sefolo with the Small Enterprise Finance Agency, which is an agency of the Department of Small Business Development. And we are responsible for implementing the relief funds on behalf of the Department of Small Business Development.
Okay, awesome. Tumi, just for all our attendees, as you're signing in, please do use the chat facility. We've provided a chat facility at the bottom. If there are specific questions, we will try and field all those questions. I'm also going to introduce my colleague Desigan, who will be taking those questions for us. And please do sign up at our newsletter at ettp.co.za for any further and future webinars. Our aim is that we want to try and get as much information out to entrepreneurs around how they are able to tap into support mechanisms during this COVID-19 pandemic. Tumi, can you just, as a recap, the fund has already been launched and it has been operational for over a week now. Maybe just give our listeners an overview around the process of how they would go about applying for the fund and what the size of the fund is and what's the qualifying criteria.
So we are implementing two funds on behalf of the Department of Small Business Development. The first fund is a business growth fund. And this business growth fund is targeted at SMMEs that are experiencing increased demand due to the current pandemic. And those are not limited to SMMEs in the healthcare sector. It could also be SMMEs that are providing services and or food products during the current climate. So this fund is exclusively to scale those businesses, existing businesses that are experiencing increased demand. And the fund has been ring-fenced approximately 300 million that is available for applications. The application started on the 2nd of April. And this morning, we approved the first set of SMMEs who have applied for that fund. The second fund that we are implementing is an SMME relief facility. And this facility is to ensure that SMMEs across the various industries are able to survive during the current pandemic and also economic crisis. The SMME relief facility is to fund purely working capital up to a maximum of 6 months and up to a maximum of 500,000. And this is across all sectors to ensure that SMMEs retain jobs, are able to pay their rent and pay their operating expenses during this time. Both funds are being put to the market at prime minus 5%, which we believe is a highly competitive interest rate in the current climate.
No, definitely. I think that the fact that we are able to provide the debt facility to businesses at prime minus 5 will be a benefit to them. But just to differentiate quickly, so the Business Growth Fund, what's the ticket size? So for how much can a business apply for at a time for that fund?
So it depends on the requirements and the capacity of the business, up to a maximum of 15 million. However, not the full 15 million would be offered at prime minus 5 if it is 15 million, because as CIFA, we have a number of other funds that we are implementing. So depending on the requirements of the business, we would be able to put together a package of different facilities to ensure that the funding requirements are met. Ideally, because we have a limited pocket of 300 million, we are looking to ensure that we stretch that across as many SMMEs as possible. And as a result, from the prime minus 5 buckets, we can only offer up to 5 million. But if SMMEs have got requirements beyond the 5 million, they can still approach us because we will be able to assist them.
Okay. And then what's the qualifying criteria?
So the qualifying criteria for the business growth is that you have to clearly demonstrate that the product or service that you are delivering is related to increased demand in the current climate. And the way that I like to explain it to many SMMEs is that if your business is permitted to trade during the lockdown, that means that you are more than likely providing an essential service that is required for you to qualify for this fund. So businesses that have approached us are healthcare related, cleaning products, masks, sanitizers, but we've also been approached by businesses that have got increased demand in terms of food orders. So typically products that were being imported from other countries are now having to be sourced locally. And some of those businesses need to scale up in order to meet the local demand. So that's the most important criteria. The other criteria is sort of your standard, although we have looked to limit the qualifying criteria. So obviously when you apply, you would have to submit that your company statutory documents, all your company statutory documents. You would have to submit at least 3 months bank statements because this is for a facility that's for existing businesses. This is not for startups. You would also need to submit proof of any orders or contracts that you are servicing currently so that we are able to see affordability. Those are some of just the high-level qualifying criteria.
So one of the things that you mentioned to me, it's not for startups. It's very much for businesses operating. What is there a cutoff criteria in terms of how long they should be operating for?
The Minister of Small Business Development is on record saying that as of the 29th of February 2020, your business should have been operating. Obviously, that then becomes the cutoff point. So we don't look at businesses post the 29th of February 2020.
Okay. So we also want to encourage all our listeners that we are doing some polls live. So please do complete the polls. We've got over 165 or 170 participants on the call at the moment to me, and out of the 172, only 14% said that they've actually applied, and 86% said they have not applied. How does a business apply? So what's the mechanism or the portal or the process of applying for either of these two funds?
The portal that all SMMEs need to go to is smmesa.gov.za. This portal is a national SMME database portal that is owned by the Department of Small Business Development. And when you register on the portal, you will receive a reference number, and that reference number will be required for your application for the various funds. And then, because there have been some technical problems on the portal, we have provided some dedicated email addresses where SMMEs can submit their actual applications. So the first one that I will share is bizgrowth, B-I-Z, growth @sifa.org.za for the business growth facility, and SMME relief @sifa.gov.za. So they need to submit their applications on those dedicated email addresses, as well as all the supporting documentation that is required. I must emphasize, Sean, that for us, if an SMME only submits an application form and they don't submit their supporting documentation, it simply means we cannot process the application as quickly as we would like to. So the appeal to all SMMEs is to go through all the required documents and ensure that when you submit your application, submit it with all your supporting documentation, as well as your reference number from the SMME SA portal.
Okay, so just to, in summary again, if you need to apply, the portal information is available. So that's smme.gov.
No, SMMESA.
Sorry, smmesa.gov.za. The email addresses that you can also use to submit is bizgrowth, that's B-I-Z, growth @sifa.org.za, as well as SMMESA relief at
SMME relief @sifa.gov.za.
Okay, just a correction there. So it's SMME relief @sifa.gov.za.
Correct. And also, all this information is available on the DSBD website, as well as DSBD stands for the Department of Small Business Development, as well as on the SIFA website, as well as the CEDA website, which is our sister agency. So if SMMEs or entrepreneurs are stuck, they can just simply go to any of those websites. The information is there.
Okay, so just so a reminder for all our listeners again that all information is available. Also, we're capturing it in the chat box. If you do feel a need to be able to ask a question as well, we are fielding some questions. Welcome to Entrepreneurship to the Point. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel at Entrepreneurship to the Point, as well as any future webinars that you might like to attend. Please sign up at our website at www.ettp.co.za. I'm going to hand over to Desigan to find out if there's any specific questions that we're getting from the participants.
Sure, thank you, Sean, and good afternoon to all of our participants who are asking questions on the poll, and good afternoon to me. Some of the questions that are coming across are in relation to, firstly, is the facility a loan or a grant or a combination of both?
The facility is a loan, so it's not a grant.
Okay, great.
That would be a loan at prime -5.
Correct.
Thank you. Around the question of UIF, if you are not UIF registered, does that sort of preclude you from applying for any of the relief funds?
It does not preclude you from applying. However, we do require you to register. And we do have support that is being offered by CEDA, who will assist any SMMEs that require to register.
Okay, great.
The one that I think, and maybe if I can emphasize this, Sean and Desigan, all SMMEs that are applying for any of the relief funds must be registered with the receiver of revenue, which is SARS, and they must be compliant. That is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. So I think very strong focus around making sure that your business is compliant. Is there any specific turnover thresholds that you guys are looking at? So what size should the business be to qualify for these funds?
The guidelines that we use as CIFA is the guidelines of SMMEs that is captured in the National Small Business Act, which I can share with Desigan and he can post, because they are sector specific around number of employees as well as revenue thresholds. So an SMME operating in construction and an SMME operating in another sector would have a different threshold. So there are sector specific, those thresholds, and I can share them with Desigan, post the chat so that it's posted and everyone is clear.
Yeah. Okay, so just the recap on that for the listeners, that they are applying a specific criteria in terms of the qualification of SMMEs as per the SMME Act. This information will be made available on our website as well at www.ettp.co.za. So based on the industry that you're at, each industry has its different definition. It's either focused on the number of employees within that organization or your annual turnover. I'm sure that information is also available on the DSBD website as part of the FAQs on the website of the fund. Anything else, Desigan?
To me, there's a question around the rigorousness of the requirements when it comes to applying for the funds. You know, if I look at the release that the department has sent out, it's quite a long list of requirements. So the question was around, you know, to what extent are some of those requirements absolutely mandatory, or will the evaluation committee be exercising a level of almost, you know, what is essential versus what is sort of nice to have?
So the list of requirements, I'm actually just trying to pull it up so that I can go through. They are shorter than the usual list of requirements when you're applying for funding. I just want to pull up. So there are those that are absolutely critical, and there are those that are where applicable. So off the top of my head, I know as a matter of fact, you must have, obviously, like I said, your company statutory documents. You must have your SARS compliance. You must have copies of the IDs of the directors. You must have 3 months bank statements and at least 6 months projections. Those are, off the top of my head, the ones that I know are non-negotiable. Some of the others are simply where applicable.
Yeah. Okay. To me, what is the payment period of the loan? So what's the payment periods, and when does one start paying off the loan?
So the way we structure the loans is all dependent on the cash flows of the business. Some of the transactions we looked at this morning were given a payment holiday of a moratorium, actually, a moratorium of 6 months before they start paying, based on the cash flow. So it's always dependent on what the cash flow of the business looks like, and we structure the transaction accordingly. The particular example that I'm giving now is an existing business that is operating in providing products such as sanitizers and cleaning materials. They've got orders from the public and the private sector, and they are simply looking for raw materials, as well as a piece of equipment, additional equipment, so that they can scale up. We structured the loan for that specific client over a 5-year period. They were given a 6-month moratorium upfront so that they can build up their cash flows, and then they start repaying the facility. So each business will be looked at in terms of its needs and how we need to structure it, particularly for the business growth. For the SMME relief, I did mention that we are only looking at working capital. We're not funding work equipment, and therefore we would not look to have that repaid for longer than 3 years. And obviously also based on the cash flows of the business. If the business requires an upfront moratorium, we will certainly consider that and make sure that it's structured accordingly, because it's in our interest to ensure that we do not overburden the SMMEs with debt, and also ensure that they are able to pay back the loans in a sustainable manner.
Okay, Tumi, so we just did a quick poll, and 79% of the respondents said that they've not received any communication as yet to their application. What is the average turnaround time for an application? Just let's give the listeners a bit of a sense in terms of the level of patience that they need to have once they do an application.
So my team is working literally round the clock, and that's the assurance that I can give the SMMEs. But also I do appreciate that as an SMME, if you put in an application, the quicker you get an answer, the better it is for you. So we have received in excess of 10,000 applications that the team is working through. The turnaround time from, and I must stress this, if you have submitted a complete application means there is no missing documentation, then the turnaround time between the submission and when you get an approval, we are working towards a 7 working day turnaround time. If your application is incomplete, then it will delay the process. And the appeal to all the SMMEs and the entrepreneurs is to ensure that they submit completed applications. Any incomplete application will simply be delayed, because then someone has to contact you to say, there's this document missing, and the team cannot start processing it immediately.
I mean, what we've seen with all the relief funds is that just been a strong just demand and applications coming in, being the system's totally overwhelmed. So we really want to just make sure that entrepreneurs, please ensure that we understand and there's an acknowledgement that all the documentation is quite cumbersome, but be as complete as possible in order to get a speedier response. Just another question to me around who qualifies. You need to be a South African registered business. And I see that one of the criteria says that your employees must be 70% South African. Can you maybe just elaborate if there's anything else on that?
So Sean, I mean, I think we are well aware that over and above the COVID pandemic, the South African economy is literally on its knees. We have to ensure that we are protecting jobs at all costs, and most importantly, ensuring that South African jobs are protected. And hence the requirement that the majority of your employees need to be South African. Because if we do not do that, the bigger picture is that I think the commissioner of SARS was on record recently saying about how they've undercollected in terms of tax. And if the state is not able to get tax not only from companies but also from employees, the whole cycle literally becomes unsustainable. As this is a government intervention, we have to ensure that SMMEs that we support in this intervention are not only compliant, but also are looking to grow ultimately the pool of the tax base in the country. So that is why that requirement around the majority of your employees being South African has been put in place, because we are actually using taxpayers' money. So you and I are the ones as taxpayers who have contributed to this fund, and therefore it makes sense that you and I should be the ones that benefits as South Africans.
So we just have a result in from, Desigan, I'll hand over to you after this. We just have a result in from the poll. It says that working capital, so the biggest challenge that our listeners are having is really the need to bolster their working capital. So 92% of the respondents says that working capital is the biggest challenge. We've spoken about the fact that the max for the business growth fund was probably about 15 million, and the max for the SMME relief fund is 500,000. We've got a question from Milton Shabalala asking, what's the lowest that a business can apply for?
So we have received, so we have not focused on the minimums. However, as CIFA, our minimum is 200,000. However, for this fund, should we receive an application below the 200,000, we will still consider it, because we understand
Milton,
that.
Sorry, can I just give you an indication? So Milton speaks about the fact that his working capital requirement is around 80,000. So what would you say to Milton Shabalala? Should he put an application?
Yeah, he must put it in and we'll look at it.
Okay, Desigan, over to you.
We can't turn away SMMEs at this point, because it is a crisis, and we need to make sure that if Milton requires 80,000 to see him over, and he qualifies and is able to pay it back, then we should consider it.
To me, there's a question that's come through just in terms of how funding is allocated to the various categories of working capital. And I think the person that posted the question must have been a banker in his former life, because he used the term waterfall effect. So with the various categories of funding, you know, at a working capital level, employees, suppliers, rental, is there any specific kind of priority? So in other words, would you fund more, for example, rental expense as compared to supply chain expenses that the businesses may have?
No, we have not decided to prioritize any pockets of working capital expenses over another, because we do recognize that each SMME has got a unique set of circumstances, and therefore we did not want to make that a hurdle for SMMEs. All you would need to do is, when you apply, clearly demonstrate that the money that you're applying for, what it's going to be used for, and have evidence to obviously substantiate that. And then we should be able to consider the application.
Okay, great. And then there was another question just around industries, but I think you addressed it earlier on. There was a question around, I'm in telecoms and IT. Can I also put through an application?
Yes, you can. And if your business falls within an essential service that is requiring scale at this particular point, you qualify for business growth. And if it is not required in terms of scale, purely from an SMME relief, you would qualify for SMME relief.
Okay, so just once again, a reminder to everyone that we will be recording the session. It is streaming live on YouTube as well, and will be available on our YouTube channel, Entrepreneurship to the Point. And we want to encourage you to go and view all the other previous webinars where we've unpacked other funds as well. To me, post-COVID-19, are you guys looking at what is potentially needed to support small businesses, both from a CIFA perspective as well as from a CEDA perspective? I know you might not be able to necessarily speak on behalf of CEDA. We will be getting them on the webinar as well. But yeah, just your thoughts post-COVID-19.
So I want to give some comfort to SMMEs that there's already an economic recovery work stream that we are a part of. And are considering various interventions into the economy. The reality is that, I argue that so lockdown does not mean post-COVID. Post-COVID for us, COVID is going to remain with us in some shape or form throughout the balance of this year. And therefore, as CIFA, we are streamlining our funding programs to ensure that we respond to that. And we anticipate that from an SMME relief perspective, we would need to offer this beyond the lockdown. And it is a funding pool that will be required for the balance of this financial year. And financial year for us ends in March next year. So we are definitely working on a set of interventions together, being led by the Department of Small Business Development, which would seek to provide some stimulus to SMMEs. And therefore, it is something that we are working on and as part of those solutions.
Tumi, thanks so much. If there's any additional questions, we'll also pass it on. But once again, I think the message out there is clear. Businesses, please focus on making sure that your compliance is in order. We understand that the circumstances are very tough at the moment, and there's quite a few relief funds out there, but it's not enough. I think that's a clear message that we've heard, that we just do not have enough relief support for small businesses. So it's both the endeavor of the Department of Small Business Development, Entrepreneurship to the Point, and any other ecosystem player to make sure that we are providing the necessary support through to small businesses during this time. We definitely want to make sure that it is key for us to get as much information as possible. We've just made available on the screen the contact details and the various portals and websites that businesses can go to ensure that they get more information. Please also sign up to our newsletter at www.ettp.co.za. Our aim is that we will really ensure that we focus on providing more and more information during the coming time and weeks to come, and that the plight of small businesses are not forgotten during this time. Desigan, is there any questions, or can we close the session?
Sean, I think we can close. Thanks.
Yep. Can I make a suggestion? What I will avail to yourselves as a platform is that if there are any SMMEs that have applied to any of the interventions we are implementing and are either struggling or not have had a response, I will make available a dedicated resource that you need to then channel those queries to. And I will share that with you, Desigan, offline, so that you've got the contact details of the person that you can speak to, and to assist and see where the holdup is with those specific SMMEs. We are trying as much as possible at this point to be accessible, and therefore we will make sure that we respond to every single one of those queries. So if they are all then channeled to Desigan, those queries, and then I will put Desigan in contact with the individual that can then respond to all those queries.
Okay, so thank you. That is a very, very gracious offer from your side as well. So just for the listeners again, to recap that, if any of you guys have made an application, you have not had a response as yet, and the time frame of 7 working days has passed, please do filter those questions and queries through to us at Entrepreneurship to the Point. The email address that you can use for your queries will be Desigan, that's DESIGAN @ettp.co.za. So Desigan @ettp.co.za. We will then filter those questions directly through to CIFA and provide you with direct information. I think on that note, we'll also close off the session. We want to thank all the entrepreneurs that have dialed in. We are over 208 people listening in at the moment. We want to wish you a blessed Easter weekend, Passover weekend, and ensure that that the information is valuable to you. Please do provide us with some feedback as well at Entrepreneurship to the Point in terms of what you'd like to hear in the next coming weeks. Thank you for dialing in. Follow us on all our social media channels. And we will also make sure that we reach out to all those people that you are wanting to speak to and get to the point around things that's pertinent to entrepreneurs. Thank you, and see you again next week. We will put a schedule together of next week's webinars, which will be posted on our website at ettp.co.za. Thank you, Tumi, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Tumi.